After careful review of the facts and the attendant law, Officer Delatorre was clearly justified in use of deadly force against Mr. Bain. The use of deadly force, Officer Delatorre was justified as the attack by Mr. Bain with a knife led him to reasonably believe that his use was necessary to prevent a direct threat of either death or serious bodily injury to another officer as well as himself. Further, Officer Delatorre was additionally justified in the use of deadly force if Mr. Bain was attempting to escape after perpetrating a forcible felony with a deadly weapon. The crime at issue was severe, potentially either aggravated assault or the attempted murder of a police officer. Mr. Bain posed a significant, immediate threat of death or serious bodily injury to all the officers and any nearby persons, and Mr. Bain was attempting to evade that arrest by fleeing the initial point of contact. Such force was necessary to prevent the arrest from being defeated by resistance or escape. Finally, because Officer Delatorre was justified in his use of deadly force, during the performance of his duties, he was not under a duty to retreat. The officers involved showed restraint, critical decision makings, and attempts to de-escalate the level of force to take Bain into custody prior to the fatal shot. There's absolutely no disputing from the video footage evidence that Bain attacks Officer Delatorre within 28 seconds of Delatorre walking out of view and calling his information into Lancaster County-wide communication. Once Bain begins his attack, he closes the distance between himself and Officer Delatorre within 2 seconds. There's also no dispute from the video footage and the witness statements that the officers did not provoke, assault, or use any force against Bain, causing him to attack. The reason Bain attacked will never be known due to his death. However, Bain's reason for attacking the police in the course of their duties is irrelevant to my determination. Bain committed himself to attacking police officers with an edged weapon. Once he attacked Officer Delatorre and Kaminsky, he committed a forcible felony, at minimum aggravated assault with an edged weapon clearly capable of causing serious bodily injury or death. During this incident, based on the video and statement evidence, there's no doubt that all 3 officers faced imminent threats from Bain, who was armed with an edged weapon, starting with the initial attack. Officer Delatorre fired his first shot in defense of Officer Kaminsky while facing the building, and there was no risk to the public. Officer Kaminsky drew his firearm with the intention of shooting Bain, but showed excellent critical thinking while under attack and did not fire his weapon due to his concern to the general public because he had no backstop to catch the bullets in event he had missed Bain. In response to the shot fired, Bain ran from police officers into an area of downtown Lancaster where numerous people were walking to work. Officer Kaminsky and Delatorre could have legally continued to respond with deadly force as he's running under the law, because now he's committed that forcible felony, he's got the dangerous weapon, both prongs he actually meets, but chose not to due to the vehicular traffic and the pedestrian traffic in the area. Instead, after being assaulted with a deadly weapon, Kaminsky de-escalates the use of force and attempts to use less than lethal force by deploying the taser. The deployment was ineffective. He hit him, he pulled out the prong, it didn't stop him at all, and Bain actually removed the taser probe while running. Bain then ended his flight at the Place Marine. The officers have now repeatedly given Bain commands to stop and drop the knife, all of which have been ignored. The entire incident would have ended with Bain being taken into custody had he just dropped the knife. That's all he had to do. Instead, he ignored the officer's commands, and Officer Kaminsky again attempted to deploy his second taser cartridge. This again shows incredible restraint by the officers and demonstrates they did not want to use lethal force against Bain unless it was absolutely necessary. Officers Nauman and Delatorre both had their firearms out and were ready positioned when giving Bain commands. And even though it failed to slow Bain with the first shot, Officer Kaminsky again deployed his taser when he refused to drop the knife. The taser missed, and Kaminsky had no further taser cartridges. The officers now faced 3 choices. First, they could retreat and let him go into the public, allowing a 6'3", 220-pound man with a dangerous knife who had just attacked the police to go into the street would have posed an enormous risk to all members of the public and would have been beyond irresponsible. Option 2 would be to holster their firearms and engage in physical hand-to-hand combat with Bain. This choice is equally absurd and could well have led to the death and or serious bodily injury of one or more of the officers and would not have guaranteed apprehension, and thus possibly could have led to additional deaths and or other violence to the public. The third, and unfortunately only real reasonable choice left, was to shoot. Officer Delatorre fired his pistol when Bain refused to get down, refused to drop the knife, and advanced towards Officer Nauman, and you saw how close they were. Officer Delatorre realized that this shot, his first one at this part, had no effect on Bain, Bain continued his movement forward, so Delatorre fired a second time, causing him to fall Bain to fall to the ground. Officer Delatorre demonstrated critical thinking, allowing Officer Kaminsky to again deploy less than lethal force, which unfortunately had no effect. He then recognized Bain's advance towards Officer Naumann and fired his weapon in defense of his brother officer. Assessing that the shot had no effect on Bain and that Bain continued his forward progress, he fired a second time, ending the imminent lethal threat from Bain. Officer Delatorre was able to recognize that Bain was no longer an imminent lethal threat and did not fire any additional shots after he was down. The officers on scene summoned immediate medical attention, assumed he was shot because he fell without actually seeing any injury. So they took a chance at that point in time. He did not drop the knife. They had to kick it from him forcibly and kicked it away from his body. But that allowed them to do that. So I think the one thing to keep in mind in addition to this, with that final encounter, is that you see the three officers have him essentially cornered. And Bain has really nowhere to go at that point in time. He can either surrender, drop the knife, and he would have been taken into custody at that point in time. He chooses the worst option, which leads to his death. His choices absolutely led to his death. Officer Delatorre had very little time to make a decision on what to do, because as Bain goes forward, and the farther he goes forward, you can see they've set up that sort of cover position. If Delatorre lets him cross too far and he misses, and he'd missed twice charting at a moving target, he risks hitting Kaminsky or civilian shooting down the street. He takes the shot just before that time, and we're fortunate that another officer wasn't hit. Officer Naumann was prepared to fire and would have fired in his statement had Delatorre not stopped him at that point in time to protect his own life, because he stands a few feet away from Bain, who has a very large knife and had been willing to attack police officers with it just moments before. So this is obviously an unfortunate case. It's a solemn case. We did talk to an individual who knew Bain for many, many years, and it didn't surprise him, and he noted the volatility of Mr. Bain, and it's evident from the beginning, really essentially the beginning of the contact with the officers, that he's agitated, and that's what unfortunately led us to this. So my job, again, is to do the legal analysis, whether they're justified. There's just no question about it. This isn't a close call. This case is closed. So I'll take questions from the media.